I drove past the Georgetown mansion of Scott Bessent, the Treasury
Oh, yeah.
Secretary, today. Two cars parked outside. Remember, this is the guy who is the architect of Trump's "Make Everything in America" tariffs. Guess what make the cars were?
Yeah. Tell me.
Well, they weren't American. A Range Rover and a
Uh-huh.
Hyundai.
He's the same guy who had the showdown fight with Elon Musk, isn't he? Described as WWE.
Yeah, the very same. The very
Yeah,
same.
so, well, I'll be looking out for the guy oiled up in his Speedos in Safeway.
I'm Mark Stone.
And I'm James Matthews. It's Friday, 2nd of May, day 103 of Trump's presidency. And as the first heads roll over Signalgate, it's been a you're fired, you're hired kind of a day. We'll explain.
And Trump has got his mineral deal, but will it bring peace in Ukraine a step closer?
Mark, we've had the first major shakeup of Trump's top team today, haven't we? And it's not Pete Hegseth.
It's not. It's Mike Waltz who announced he'd be leaving his job as national security advisor on Thursday morning.
Yeah, and of course, Walls, he's the guy who actually set up the Signal group chat that evolved into Signalgate, the scandal. You remember there were attacks on the Houthis in Yemen, and Waltz and others, JD Vance, Hegseth, other cabinet members, they were exchanging texts about these attacks. You know, it was laid bare details, timings, and this was a scandal, make no mistake. And, you know, to look at these messages, it's excruciating stuff. It's like schoolboys exchanging gossip, you know, complete with emojis. I mean, Mike Waltz, on being told about attack plans, sensitive detail, he put three emojis: the American flag, the fist bump, and the fire emoji. I mean, juvenile stuff.
Yeah, and of course we know about all these embarrassing emojis because he added the Atlantic magazine's editor-in-chief Jeffrey Goldberg into the chat. I mean, what an almighty clanger! Now, the reason that he says Goldberg's number ended up being added is because his phone, so he says, auto-saved Goldberg's number with someone else's name, with the name of the national security spokesman, Brian Hughes. So he thought he was adding Hughes to the chat, but actually he was adding a very prominent journalist.
Yeah, not a great look for the head of national security not to know who he's texting. But, you know, Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary, another member of his top team, who was caught up in Signal Gate number one, he's also been caught up in Signal Gate number two, of course, because we have discovered that he was on Signal with his wife and brother. They both have roles in the Pentagon, but they don't have anything like top level security clearance. And yet he was sharing details, timings, similar stuff about attacks in Yemen with them, and yet Trump is holding on to him.
Yeah, I think for now Trump's holding on to him because he has spent so much political capital getting him appointed. Remember, it's harder to replace Hegseth than it is to replace the national security advisor because the defense secretary, Hegseth, that post must be Senate confirmed. That's not the case for the national security advisor. Trump can just pick a replacement. Also, I think it may well be the case that Trump sees Hegseth as more of a loyalist, closer to him, maybe more malleable. He is the former Fox News host, of course, not the seasoned politician that Mike Waltz, now out, is. He is, of course, the former representative from Florida. So a political mind up against maybe a more malleable Fox News host.
But you know, he's not been fired for long because he's been rehired, hasn't he?
Yeah, it's interesting. He's not out completely. He has got another job, and I wonder if that's Trump trying to keep him close. Because if he threw him out altogether, then maybe he could turncoat against Trump. Instead, Trump has appointed him to be the ambassador to the United Nations, so he will head from Washington up to New York for that role. The other bit of news, which is pretty remarkable, is that Marco Rubio will take on the role of National Security Advisor alongside his current job. He is, of course, Secretary of State. So he's going to be double hatting two critical roles within the administration.
Yeah, and this was a big surprise to many of us. It was also a surprise to Tammy Bruce. She is the press spokesperson for Marco Rubio. She was standing in front of a news conference when this announcement was made on Truth Social.
The president has just written on Truth Social that Mike Waltz is going to become the new U.S. ambassador to the United Nations.
Well, there
Therefore,
you
no
go.
longer the National Security
Fabulous.
Advisor. And in addition to that, he says that in the interim, Secretary of State Marco Rubio will serve as National Security Advisor while continuing his strong leadership at the State Department. Do you know how long he's going to be serving in both roles?
It is clear that I just heard this from you.
It's only the second time in history that one man has done both these jobs, Secretary of State, essentially Foreign Secretary, and National Security Advisor simultaneously. Kissinger did both jobs back in the 1970s. But, James, I think that was a kind of different world. Things moved so much more slowly in terms
Yeah,
of
that's for
geopolitics
sure.
back then. So it's controversial because doing these two jobs at once, it consolidates significant foreign policy power into the hands of one person. The national security advisor is supposed to be somewhat independent, somewhat the arbiter of the other foreign related agencies and departments. But now you have got one man running both the State Department, the Foreign Office effectively, and the national security team as well. One source said to me that this demonstrates, quote, national security malpractice.
Yeah, you've thought that through, Mark. I wonder if you've thought that through more than Donald Trump has, frankly, just looking at the whiplash of today. And, Waltz, a man I think whose card was marked. I think anywhere else in most other countries with most other presidents, political expediency would have dictated that at the moment of scandal, the guy had to be got rid of. But Trump has been waiting, hasn't he, for the 100 days, I think, realizing the 100 days is the day of scrutiny, the day on which he is assessed, his presidency performance is measured. He didn't want the blot on the copybook before that day. I think now he's of a mind, for a reset, but it had to be addressed. It was recklessness over responsibility at the heart of this government, and it reflected on Trump, his credibility and his judgment.
Right, let's move on to the minerals deal because we brought you that headline at the start of yesterday's episode, but now we've got a lot more information on this deal that's been signed between the United States and Ukraine. At its core, it means that the United States will share the profits from Ukraine's energy and mineral reserves. So when they sell things like lithium, titanium, coal to the rest of the world, the United States gets a cut. The purpose, though, from a US perspective, is to provide an economic incentive for the US to continue investing in Ukraine's defense and its reconstruction after the war ends, hopefully.
Yeah, this deal is one of the reported 7 steps in the US plan for peace in Ukraine. So it's a big deal that this has been signed. And at times, of course, it's looked uncertain as to whether or not it would be. The plan was, of course, for it to be signed back in March when Ukraine's President Zelensky was visiting the White House. Who can forget that? Trump and JD Vance, berating him in front of the world's media, and all, of course, fell apart.
Yeah, I mean, that encounter in the Oval Office was so memorable, so extraordinary, wasn't it? And then replaced weeks later by another encounter, another moment, another image in the Vatican. The same two men, but this time the feel of the moment felt entirely different. The private tete-a-tete between the two of them. And it appears, certainly from what Zelensky has been saying, that that was indeed a very, very important moment. Zelensky confirmed that he told Trump at that moment in the Vatican at the Pope's funeral that he was ready to conclude the deal. And intriguingly, he said that it was the first result of that conversation, a suggestion that they talked about a lot of things, and that we will get more detail of what they've agreed in the days ahead.
Yeah, historic deal indeed. It still has to be approved, of course, by Ukraine's parliament, and handing over half of the profits from the country's mining business. That's a heavy, heavy price to pay.
The way the Americans are spinning this, they're saying, look, if we invest in your minerals, we have got a stake in your future. We're not going to want to see Russia invade another day, as some fear it might, because we'll part own what's underneath your feet. Um, and Trump simplifies it even more by saying, look, if there are American citizens on the ground in Ukraine, then clearly Putin's not going to invade. Well, I mean, that's plainly not true, because there were plenty of Americans in Ukraine 3 years ago, and Putin still invaded. I think, Zelensky talks about other things that they might have agreed. I think a key part of all this is the European force that the French and the Brits have said that they will put in place in Ukraine. A deterrence force, or a sort of reassurance force, that's the language that's being used. French and British troops on the ground as a reassurance force to reassure the Ukrainians that they are not going to face Russian aggression down the line. But what the Europeans really want is the United States to have an oversight role in that ground force. And at the moment, publicly at least, the Americans are not agreeing to that.
Yeah, there is still the question of trust. And I think we're a long way from Ukraine having the trust and faith in the United States backing. We have, this agreement. And Scott Bessent, Treasury Secretary, he's talking about a process based on a free, sovereign, and prosperous Ukraine. That's as may be. But Ukraine's still a long way from where it wants the United States to be. This 7-point plan, there are red lines in that Ukraine simply cannot accept. And I don't know if you caught, Mark, the news conference. It was in the press briefing room by Stephen Miller, Deputy Chief of Staff. I mean, he was asked the key question: with this deal backed by the US, what leverage does that give Ukraine over Russia? He was asked twice. That's a central question. And didn't answer it. His sort of non-answer was that the president's goal is to end the killing and achieve a peace settlement. But he also said this about the deal. This is meant to pay back the United States for the hundreds of billions of dollars our taxpayers have spent subsidizing the war in Ukraine. That turned my head, and that would have made them turn up the TV in Ukraine, I think, because it's not as if Ukraine has to pay money paid up until now. That aid is behind them. But to listen to Stephen Miller, I think Kyiv might be justified in being anxious about that.
Yeah, and so what is the small print? That's the question. We know that Ukraine will almost certainly not get to be a member of NATO, but what about becoming a member of the European Union? That's something they'd like. Is that on the table? And then I think the million-dollar question, unanswered at the moment, is if you have British and French forces on the ground in Ukraine, what happens when Russian soldiers still occupying the land to the east of the front line? What happens when one of them kills a British or French soldier? Where does it go then?
Does Trump confront Putin with military strength?
Right.
And I think we're a long way from that.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, Mark, we were talking earlier about the jobs shake-up at the White House. It looks like somebody else could be in the market for a new gig.
Yeah, the Wall Street Journal published an article late on Wednesday night claiming that Tesla, the electric car company, of course, currently fronted by Elon Musk, is looking for a new CEO. Interested, James?
Yeah. It's got to be easier than a podcast every day for 100 days, surely.
Yeah, Tesla has denied that that's the case. They say the reporting is wrong, but their profits have dropped 71% since the start of the year, and many are pointing the finger at one Elon Musk.
Yeah, he's taken a chainsaw to the profits, hasn't he? But his work in Doge has made him unpopular with many Americans, and that is reflected back on the company that he runs. As we've said before, there have been campaigns to boycott Tesla, and that's affected their bottom line. Musk recently said he was stepping back from his work at Doge, reducing his time in Washington to a few days a week to focus on his other work. And of course, we had that cabinet meeting. Musk is sitting there, a forlorn figure, I thought, with a double baseball cap on, just a guy wanting to be loved. And actually not getting any love back. So, Mark, I'm sitting here in DC on my own. You're at home, but you're heading back to the UK, yeah?
I'm at home. I've got a flight to catch in a couple of hours. Yeah, I'm off to the UK for a week. But because we're so dedicated, I will pop into the podcast studio there to do some episodes next week.
Yeah, why should you escape after all? Look forward to it. That's it for today. But as always, we'd love to hear from you. The email is TRUMP100 at sky.uk.
And remember, you can follow the podcast for free wherever you're listening. So make sure you do and that you don't miss an episode.
And we'll see you on Monday for another day of Trump 100.